Tonight on Insights on PBS Hawaii, we'll look back at some of the major issues and stories for our state in 2012 for this special year-end edition of Insights. Now, live in our studio, our host, Dan Boylan.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Dan Boylan. Elections and money dominated the news this year. A redrawn election map placed all state legislative offices up for grabs, and delays and confusion marred both primary and general elections. Oahu's controversial rail transit system appears to have come out the winner in the Honolulu mayor's race, while on the federal level, Hawaii elected its first female U.S. senator, and it sent the first Hindu to become a representative in Congress. Tourist arrival numbers surged upward in 2012, an indication of an economy on the mend. But a sluggish economy overall still challenged island families, businesses, educators, and social services providers. Public education made headlines with improved student test scores, but Hawaii's teachers still have no contract. Higher education was also in the spotlight when the University of Hawaii's bungled the handling of the Stevie Wonder concert fiasco, or whatever you want to call it, and a public outcry ensued. Tonight we'll review these and other top Hawaii stories from 2012 with a panel that includes an economist, 3 journalists, and the head of one of Hawaii's largest charitable foundations. We'll also ask them to speculate on what the new year will bring. You can join our discussion by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments for our panelists. The contact information you now see on your screen will be repeated throughout the program. We also want to remind you that Insights is live on both your television and computer screens. It's streaming on our website right now at pbshawaii.org. This program will also be posted online. Now to our panel. Carl Bonham is an economist and executive director of the University of Hawaii's Economic Research Organization. UHERO provides analysis and develops quarterly economic forecasts for the state. Carl is also a member of the State Council on Revenues, responsible for predicting state tax revenues in order to help policymakers develop budget and spending plans. Kelvin Taketa is president and CEO of the Hawaii Community Foundation, one of the largest charitable foundations in the state. The Community Foundation manages more than $41 million in annual contributions to a wide range of programs that help Hawaii families and communities. Sara is Honolulu Civil Beat's assistant editor. Born and raised in Honolulu, Sara has spent most of her career on the mainland, reporting for the Los Angeles Times and working as a columnist and reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Steve Petranik is the editor of Hawaii Business Magazine. Steve has been a journalist for more than 3 decades. He was an editor at the Honolulu Star-Bulletin for 18 years and also worked at the Advertiser before joining Hawaii Business in 2009. Steve has covered news internationally, and his stories have appeared in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and the Washington Post, as well as here in Hawaii. You know, my articles appear in midweek. Richard Borreca has covered Hawaii politics for the past 40 years. He was the longtime bureau chief of the Honolulu Star-Bulletin and currently writes a thrice-weekly column for the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. It is thrice weekly, right?
That is.
Was 40 years about right?
That's it.
That's it. I got it right. Well, that's pretty good. As we all know, we are here on a Thursday night, 3 days after Senator Daniel K. Inouye's death. Is that the biggest story of 2012?
Yes.
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 Without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to, and it's going to reverberate in one form or another for, I would think, most of the next year.
Why? One senator?
One senator who, because he and Hawaii sort of define each other, and his passing is going to mean that we're going to have to find a new way to talk about Hawaii, especially on a federal level. And what Hawaii does in the future will be without Dan Inouye's help and assistance in Washington.
Kelvin, you were?
His reach and what he did for the state, I think, is phenomenal. And especially if you think about his long championing of a number of Native Hawaiian programs and falling short of federal recognition. I think it really is going to be a tough haul for some of the programs that we've come to really rely on in the state that have helped the Native Hawaiian community in particular. I also think there are other institutions here that the senator has been the reason why they've been able to exist. And we're going to see, like Richard said, I think a reshuffling or a restructuring about a lot of institutions in the state.
Carl, I've been involved in conversations the last few days about him and his death, and always the economic impact of Inouye, and the always seemed to me overstated idea that Dan Inouye was our economy or our fourth biggest industry or whatever. What kind of financial impact? Have you thought about that?
Fourth biggest might be about right.
Seriously?
And yet it's not just the senator, right? I mean, some of this money will continue to come into the state. I mean, granted, he shepherded it through the various stages in D.C., but some of it is going to keep coming. And so it's not like we're going off our own sort of fiscal cliff. I wouldn't classify it quite that bad. So we're not going into a deep recession next year because he's gone. But you can't, I don't think you can overstate the impact on so many, I mean, everything, right? Name one area where he didn't have a role in the last 40 years.
What's extraordinary about Dan is how much he planned for his own departure. Yes. And putting things in place, like how important Hawaii is in the U.S. military structure, things like the Maui supercomputer, so many things that he knew that he had to put in place while he was alive that would continue to help Hawaii after he was gone.
Sara, you agree? The biggest story?
I do, and I think that more to speaking to Carl's point, the money will still come. I think one of the things that we did at Civil Beat is we looked at the example of Alaska. What happened to Alaska when it lost its appropriations chair chief, Ted Stevens? And the answer was, and we talked to several editorial page editors and other folks who have covered this extensively for Alaska papers, and they told us that the secret is it won't be so bad so long as you get somebody on appropriations. They have Lisa Murkowski, who's now their senior senator, on appropriations. So the secret for us, I mean, looking into the next 113th Congress, is that you do have Hirono on some different panels, but she's not on appropriations. So could whoever replaces Dan Inouye somehow sneak become one of 30 folks who sits on that appropriations committee to help keep the pipeline going? And that seems to be the secret.
I think that really the other thing, I had a chance to work with the senator when I lived in Washington, D.C., and work with the Nature Conservancy. But what we're really going to miss is the guy who gave people in Hawaii a sense they could be aspirational about things with the federal government. There will be a fair share of foundational things, like Steve suggested, that will continue. But he was the person that made people think big about what we could do in Hawaii around, with SOEST and the research dollars at SOEST, the supercomputer, other things like that. And we will not have that aspirational person in that sense anymore.
There's a big concern, I would think, right away at the East-West Center. The East-West Center has always been, it was created as an earmark with Lyndon Johnson. It has been fostered through the decades because of Dan Inouye's insistence. Where that falls now, and I sure hope, because I like the East-West Center, but I sure hope they've got a good post-Inouye plan in the offing. The other thing they have to think about is the military stuff. Yes, we're still going to be, loading the bombs and fixing the tires and that sort of stuff because of our geographic importance. But Barking Sands, the biggest employer on Kauai, the Navy has always wanted to get rid of that. This is a chance now for them to take steps in that, and especially now when Congress is looking at trimming the federal budget for defense in many, many ways. Barking Sands could go very easily. Pearl Harbor, as a place to fix ships, has always been under the eye as a place that it can be done much cheaper on the West Coast. It may not be true, but that's what people are arguing who would like to see those jobs in the West Coast, in California.
I don't want to move to 2013 this quickly, but necessarily, but But Sara says that if we get somebody on appropriations, we should be things won't happen as quickly. Do the rest of you agree with that? Does 2013, if we have someone on appropriations, we've heard during election years, Republicans would say, wait a minute, you guys make too much of Dan Inouye, that this business, a lot of this military stuff's going to be here no matter what, because we are where we are.
Well, there's going to be fewer dollars spent out of Washington in the future. That's pretty clear from all these negotiations going on, no matter who was representing Hawaii. But now that Inouye's gone, you've got this fear that what smaller dollars are available, less of it's going to be coming to Hawaii. Whether it's military spending or any other spending coming out of Washington.
It was interesting. 2 senators yesterday and today turned down chairmanship of the Appropriations Committee. They wanted to keep their existing committee. So it's not the plum that it used to be when Inouye was riding high. It doesn't have, because, as you said, because the budgets are getting smaller and because earmarks are less and less relevant, if at all, around.
I think Dan also, you can't just look at the total dollars. You kind of have to look at where it will go. I think if you take a nonprofit lens, for example, Senator Inouye was extraordinary and very effective at getting federal funds to assist capital projects for organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, for PBS, for other kinds of things. And I think what you lose is this champion in Washington, and now it's going to be incumbent on all of us to fly 5,000 miles to plead our case in Washington when we really didn't quite have to do it that way while he was around. And I think that's where you're going to see the loss is not going to be over, I think, the really big projects. You're just going to see fewer things that are going to be done because the resources don't exist. It's not as easy for us to go to Washington if you're a nonprofit organization, health and human service organization, and plead your case and to actually know even how to navigate that system. He had a phenomenal staff. They did incredible work, and we're really going to, hopefully, whoever takes his seat will keep a lot of that infrastructure and talent in play, but it's a much tougher road.
I will now slip some money to Kelvin because I have to declare my conflict of interest. My son was for the last couple of years the press secretary to Senator Inouye, and so thank you, Kelvin, very much for trying to help my son find another job.
I don't think that in our discussions about Inouye that we should make it so crass as like it's a cargo cult, because I think he was an inspirational and aspirational leader for the state and gave hope and a cause for other people to get into politics from Hawaii and to show the way. There are legions of people who served in his office that are Dan Inouye veterans.
I was thinking about him and Najo Yoshinaga. There was a time, remember, 25 years ago, the former state senator, now deceased, you couldn't turn around without running into somebody who, in politics, who was a disciple of Najo Yoshinaga. You could and both of these guys, Inouye's got the same sort of group, and all of the, both of these guys had also that war experience and the Japanese-American experience and the business of fighting for equality. That makes for aspiration.
Those are the people who show you why it was called the Greatest Generation.
Right, exactly.
Truly. And they're planning. So I mean, he was also planning for the future. But
another topic, the economy. Are businessmen more optimistic at the end of 2012 than they were at the end of 2011?
We did a survey, 401 business leaders. They're definitely, the optimism is as high as it's been since 2004. And what's interesting, though, is if you take that the survey we did 6 months ago, the tourism industry's optimism was stronger than the overall business leaders' optimism. But now it's actually below there. Now, does that mean tourism leaders think they've actually peaked or something? It's counterintuitive because the tourism industry is carrying the Hawaii economy. If not for tourism, we would be down in the doldrums. You used the word subpar. Exactly. We would have a very poor Hawaii economy without tourism. And what's carrying tourism? Waikiki, much more than the neighbor islands, and increased airlift. Over the last 2 years, dozens of new routes, not just increased flights, but we're talking absolutely new routes that were never flying to Hawaii.
Well, why is Waikiki carrying it? Is it because of all the reconstruction that's gone on down there and investment, or?
That certainly helped a bit, and it's not going to places like the Big Island, which is still lagging behind. Maui's doing much better. Kauai and the Big Island lagging behind. They need more of those people flying directly into those places.
I think it's worth looking too at what's happening in the world and world events. I think we're getting a lot more visitors from California and from Canada, because normally they would go and take a vacation in Mexico, but hey, that's probably not a place you want to be nowadays, because the safety just isn't what it was. I mean, even places like Cancun, you could go there and still walk down a wrong street, and who knows where you'll end up. So I think that when you look at like the instability of the places that were cheaper, back in the day, I think that's one reason why Hawaii's getting a big lift. Would you agree?
I think that the real driving feature of this recovery has been the lift. It's been the airlift, and Hawaiian Airlines deserves an incredible, tip of the hat gratitude for what they did, obviously in their own self-interest. I mean, this was a strategic decision that they made to go into areas that were completely unserved, right? Nothing, the direct flights to Australia, the increased flights to originally they were going into the West Coast, into the markets that weren't served, and into Seoul, and that's part of the reason that Waikiki is doing so well, is because the markets that they're going into, and initially the increased lift was all coming into Oahu, right? When you go back to 2011, when the lift started increasing, late 2010 and early 2011, it was all Oahu. It wasn't, almost nothing was. Then it started to fill in on the neighbor islands. But you mentioned the investments in Waikiki. Those were very important. Something like $2.5 billion invested in Waikiki that gives you hotels and timeshares that you can charge top dollar for. And without those, you'd still be looking at, off beach and very, very low room rates. And so that investment was important. Where that lift was coming from is very important.
And would that have happened without all of that change that Mayor Harris put in, all that investment that Harris put into Waikiki? There was an enormous amount of redoing things down there with parks and monuments and so forth.
Well, it was prettied up to a great extent, but perhaps if they had looked underneath the surface a little bit more and done some sewers and pipes, I think I would have been a little bit more happy about it.
He never wants to give a politician any credit. He never does.
The hoteliers would have renovated their properties.
Right.
Yeah.
When exactly it would have occurred, who knows? I don't think you can really, call a statue and a park and widening sidewalks something that really was the key to those big investments from the beach walk. And
making nice with Waikiki has been a mayor's job one ever since Frank Fosse was mayor.
Even as much as he fought it. They didn't always do very much. Yeah. There was always much talk about it, but not always a lot of doing about it. What are you going to be telling the Council on Revenues? What what numbers do they have? Are things looking great for 2012?
Well, we're going to have to wait and see what happens in D.C. I mean, the story that I've been telling for the last 6-8 months is that Hawaii is doing well. Tourism is going gangbusters, obviously. The rest of the economy is not doing that much. And what is unfortunate about all this is that so much of our fate depends on policymakers in D.C. and in Europe. And we don't have a whole lot that we can do about that. We have to just wait and see if they do their jobs. And if you assume that they will behave somewhat rationally and do the right thing, then 2013, I think, is going to be a good year.
What about China? What is the China tourism? Has that meant anything yet? What about the Korean tourism? Has that meant anything yet?
It's interesting. You think Hawaii is a paradise. People come from wherever to come here. But because there's three different places that you can fly out of Korea to come here, and only one from China, that's why you've got so many more you've got more Koreans coming here than Chinese. It's partly the visa thing, but that airlift. People don't want to go on 6 different connecting flights to get to Hawaii. They want it. It has to be convenient.
One shot.
Paradise is only so much of a draw, and that's why we don't have people from South America yet. Once we get the Dreamliner in service and is coming to Hawaii, or jets like that, long distance, very comfortable jets, we're going to start getting people from Rio de Janeiro and from more people coming from Europe and maybe South Asia, huge markets. And because Waikiki is sort of at capacity right now, and we're not going to get more hotels there, they can just start charging more for the same rooms, and that'll bring in more revenue, but not necessarily more people onto Oahu.
What about construction? I mean, construction, it seems to me
So part of the reason that Hawaii's economy hasn't done better, we're very much like the rest of the country. Areas of the country that have had really strong export growth, that have a strong sector of their economy that's export driven, and that's tourism for us,
right,
have done better than other parts of the country. And throughout the whole country, the thing that's dragging the rest of the economy down is state and local government. In other words, right, job losses and cuts in spending at states and local government, and construction. And all that's changing now. And you've seen it at the national level. Housing starts are up, home sales are up. You're beginning to see the bottoming out of the state and local government sector. In Hawaii, state government jobs are down about 2,000 from where they were in 2007, and about 3,000 from where they were at the peak. Ironically, they kept going up as we went into the Great Recession. So that's still acting as a drag. Construction has actually, I would say it's turned the corner. We've seen 3 or 4 months of rising construction job counts. The permit numbers are very good, and of course we're coming off of nothing. Right? We basically were building nothing in 2010 and 2011. That's one of the reasons why we're about to start this rebound, because if you go long enough building nothing, and then you start to have some income growth and job growth and some visitor expansion, you have to start building.
Well, the Kaka'ako development, which we talked about a little bit. Now, out in Libra de Oahu, out in Kapolei, I swear that place, Kapolei changes every 20 minutes. Another building seems to be, another business seems to be going in there. And then the Ho'opili and I think, who is it? Castle and Cook has a project up in Mililani, and now apparently the rail, well, let's talk about that in a minute, but apparently the rail looks like it might be going. That's an awful lot of construction, isn't that? Doesn't all of that mean?
It's kind of ironic that, I mean, all of the delays in rail have the potential. So let's say that we get started spring of 2013 or fall of 2013 with real construction. I think what's going to happen is that rail is going to occur right when the construction boom is in full force in the residential sector, whether it's high-rises or single-family. Because if you look at what's happening in home prices, so we're talking about high single-digit growth for this year. And our forecast for next year is 7% growth. I think we may see more than that. There's only
by growth, what do you mean?
In median home prices.
So in the prices of homes?
On Oahu, yeah. So right now, for this year, 2012, we're going to be somewhere around $640,000 for a median price for the whole year. The high point was about $670,000. Next year, we'll probably pass that because we didn't build anything. We've got income and job growth. We've got the lowest interest rates we've had in forever, and there's nothing for sale. I mean, there's like 2.5 months of inventory out there.
Wow.
And so home prices are going up. Yeah. And when prices start to go up, the reason you're seeing these condo projects is because the developers know that home prices are starting to go up, and they've got to get these things built in the next 3, maybe 4 years before prices get out of reach and the whole thing stops.
Kelvin, we've had a lot of meetings at this table over the last couple of years talking about the problems of social services in the state and how they've been underfinanced. Have things gone better for them this year?
So let me just say one thing about the economy. I think this is a tale of two cities. I think that if you go to the neighbor islands, they're substantially worse off than we are in Oahu. If you go to rural communities, they're substantially worse off than we are in metropolitan areas. If you look at poor families, they're lagging behind. As the recovery gets better, they're going to lag. That's just what happens in this kind of a circumstance. So the demand for human service organizations, for example, for families that are at the margins or for at-risk kids or what have you, is going to continue. So it's going to be, I want people to understand there's a paradox here, because Carl's right. The economy's getting better, and all the indications are that things are getting better. But we're not going to see that improvement in the human service sector in 2013. Then you take sequestration. Already, we've had significant budget cuts at the federal level around domestic spending. If sequestration hits, that's another big cut on top of what we already have, and it's going to be a profound impact on a lot of human service organizations, most of whom get the bulk of their money comes from the federal or state government. So it's going to be tough.
Oh, how's your charitable giving gone this year? Has it been high, low, the same?
So the 2012 story around charitable giving actually goes back to the legislature in 2011 that capped the deductibility of itemized deductions, including charitable deductions. It was a late in the session thing.
That hits now, right?
And so people didn't know in 2011 that when they made a charitable contribution, if you were an individual, and your amount of itemized deductions that you could claim on your state tax return was $25,000. You take your mortgage, you take major health costs, and then you don't have any ability to do anything in that $25,000 cap. Nobody knew about it in 2011. People knew about it in 2012. And I believe it's had a significant impact on charitable giving in 2012. We don't have hard data yet, but we've got lots of anecdotal stories of donors who have said to people, listen, I love your organization, but this is all I'm able to deduct on my state taxes, and I'm either going to wait this out or I'm not going to give as much. And so I think the story around charitable giving is going to be, it probably gets a little bit better because the economy is getting better, but it's not what it should be because of the charitable cap.
There's a question here about going back to the election. We saw an awful lot of money spent in this last election campaign, in the Senate race and congressional races, and then, of course, in the mayoral race, big time. And somebody's worried about the Pacific Resource Partnership. Tell us more about PRP. Who are its directors? Why they obviously have an inordinate amount of influence when it comes to determining Oahu's future. What did you guys find out about them?
PRP, that's a subject I can talk about. Well, what's interesting is we did this thing called the public file, where we went around and looked just at outside money spent on TV ads, and we found that by far.
Well, that was a good.
It basically involved us sending the intern every Friday to the TV station to pull a couple of files and add everything up. And what we found is that PRP was probably the biggest spender. I think they spent close to probably a little bit more than that, $3 million. Overall, the outside spending just on TV ads, this is the 30-second blips that come on in between news broadcasts, was $14 million. Kind of a lot of money that maybe could have gone better used, to a nonprofit or to some other use, making our society better instead of just, And
it was all on one race. It was all on the mayoral race, spent on trashing one candidate.
And the interesting thing about PRP, though, is that because it is one of these new post-Citizen United independent expenditure committees, so it really doesn't have to tell you everything about itself. And
we still don't know really where all the money came from. One of the things that's going to reverberate with PRP is not just the new acceptance for vicious negative advertising in the Hawaii market, but also PRP did a lot of on-the-ground research of they hired a lot of people and they went door to door and they asked people who they're going to vote for and when they're going to vote. And they took all that information, geocoded it, so now they can make maps of where supporters or opponents for different things are, and they can use that. And who they give that information to will be crucial in the 2014 election.
And don't forget those Imua Rail commercials. Those were the ones that featured local people saying, I could really use the rail project, Imua Rail. That's one of those shadow committees that we just don't know who's behind it, who's funding it. And actually, interestingly enough, we bring up Cayetano. In his lawsuit suing PRP for defamation, he says he wants to see the board of directors of PRP and of Imua Rail. He wants those people named so that it's not just PRP being held accountable, but actually, like we said, the as yet unnamed donors.
Yeah. Well, what's going to happen on those lawsuits? We don't have a lawyer here, do we? You are a lawyer, but reformed lawyer. I'm sorry. They can cause economic damage, at least to the construction project, right?
I think I can answer that one. I mean, I think the latest with there's 2 lawsuits going related to rail. The first one has to do with archaeological surveys not being done in the appropriate manner, and having to do with Kaka'ako specifically. So the idea being that, the Supreme Court came down with their ruling once the city, and that's what stopped construction and stopped the shovels from moving. Once that area is studied in the manner in which the Supreme Court says it should be, presumably that would satisfy the order, and then that could move on. The one that's still pending, the one that we're watching every day, we're clicking on that website to see when Judge Tashima's...
Clicking on that website.
Seeing when Judge Tashima's decision comes out, has to do with Cayetano again suing and saying that the city did not appropriately consider alternatives and did not appropriately, again, consider cultural resources. And that could have a potentially big impact. I know we've been celebrating this week that the $1.55 billion is officially signed and come through from the federal government, but in fact, if the judge says that the decision wasn't made correctly, it vacates this so-called record of decision, which is the one thing that needs to be formalized before the feds can give us the money. So there's a possibility that the money will have to be given back, and everything will have to start all over again as far as environmental studies.
Dan Inouye will roll over in his grave, I believe, if that in fact happened. Love Insights, the person says. Love Insights. Just wanted can we advertise a little bit here?
Thank you,
question, why was the, thank you, Mrs. Boylan. She's napping by now. Why was the film tax credit defeated when it would have helped Hawaii to create a modern industry, diversify our economy, and create high-paying, creative, and high-tech jobs?
Tax credits cost money.
Tax credits are not good policy.
Well, but it happened because we were getting enough industry as it was. You had enough films and movies being filmed here. You thought, we're overdoing it. We don't need any more. But yes, it was partly it's the money. Same reason that the solar tax credit is under fire, and the same reason that they cut the deductions on taxes. They're trying to raise money any way they can, and it's getting tough. They're doing it at the margins. They'd rather not do the whole.
Professor Bonham is deeply concerned as the rest of the council is.
Well, I mean, we're just concerned that we get our forecast right. If the government wants to give away all of its tax revenue on whatever it wants, that's still bad policy. But it's the council is just a forecasting body. We don't do the policy. But if you look at the people who do the policy, the Tax Review Commission, every single tax review commission has said you need to stop using tax credits so much, because it's like a backdoor expenditure, right? You say, we're going to do this, and we have no idea how much money we're going to end up spending.
And the tough part is you can never tell who's getting the biggest amount of tax credits, period, because it's not public record who's getting what tax credits.
Well, and that's a very good point about why this is a bad policy. You go back to the high-tech tax credits, right? Yeah. Who got the money? What was it spent on?
No idea.
We had Dr. Sumner LaCroix and Andrew Cato and Jim Mack did a study for UHERO, and they went through and tried to do the best they could to identify all the companies that were receiving money in there. Some of them you could find a company name, and then you Google them and they don't exist, right? So if you want to spend the money, spend it. But don't do it through this backdoor tax credit mechanism. And then the other thing is
but you can't raise a tax anymore. Have you been watching what's going on in Washington? See, you're not allowed to raise a tax. Politicians can't raise taxes. Carl, you're acting like you're a professor.
They can in Hawaii. And they are going to raise them in D.C. on January 1. It's going to happen.
It looks that way, doesn't it?
It does.
It looks that way.
There's only one house that can't raise them.
Yeah. Brad at Grand Pond, Kaneohe, in light of school shootings, he wants to bring this up, proposes emergency doors or breakout panels in all ground floor school rooms or libraries. Has anyone heard during this year 2012 until very recently, any concern about safety in our schools?
Not according to this. I mean, not according to the horror that happened.
I've heard it from my wife, who's a teacher, who they have vagrants wandering through their campus and they find needles on their playgrounds. And I have heard it on campus at UH, which has seen a rash of break-ins in my building, and my building is so insecure that that's why their break-ins are happening there.
Also several sexual assaults, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Yeah.
There have been also, you know, a number of reports around bullying. There was a fight at Kealakekee that happened last week. You know, I think the DOE is trying to deal with that, but clearly, you know, public safety in schools is an important thing, but no one could have ever imagined what happened last week, and I think that hasn't been sort of the focus of it.
I think it's difficult too because all of our schools were built in an era where you know you had just open hallways, and it's meant to capture the trade winds because it's hot here. But it's not like on the mainland where you had schools that were enclosed already for winters. It's just going to be, I could just be really difficult to imagine, for example, closing off, you know, Cocoa Head School, which, you know, has, like any other, you know, is open air everywhere. I just don't really think it's something that'll happen.
Let's talk a bit about education. You've written a piece, I know, saying that you think one of the places that we're falling down in our public schools something terribly is with the gifted and talented.
Absolutely. We're so focused on raising the level of the lowest performing students that the super achievers either have to go to a private school or they are not tested to the fullest of their ability. And those are the leaders of tomorrow. Those are the innovators. Those are the people that are going to drive our economy in the years to come. And if we don't test them, we don't push them to the fullest, they're not going to be doing those great things. And other places are doing it. They're doing it within public school systems. They're doing it effectively elsewhere across the country. We're not doing that sort of thing. I think one way we could do it is with technology. We don't need an elite school on every island. We could have one, say, at McKinley, and then we broadcast to Hilo. We broadcast to all the schools across the state. Maybe there's a part-time teacher who drops in on these kids, but we're giving them really rigorous courses all over the state, and we're giving them a private school education from public schools.
Boy, you'd have trouble with that, wouldn't you? I mean, we already have an argument sometimes about charter schools as being a kind of private school in a special situation set up for kids.
But I think what Steve's saying, though, is right. That the one magic bullet here, to the extent there is one, is technology. It's going to allow us to have master teachers for AP courses in public schools where you can't do that in every single high school, but you could have, you know, an AP calculus teacher at Farrington, you know, who through distance learning is teaching the couple of kids on Lanai. And that's clearly, we can do that now. We just have to take, I think, a broader approach about how we use technology to kind of carry out, you know, the instruction for teachers instead of having the teacher standing in front of the room.
Right, and the technology in education, but technology across the state government. I mean, the transformation that happened in private industry over the last 20 years because of technology only partly happened in state government. And now that we...
How about minuscule?
True. But now we have a chief information officer who has a vision. Sonny Bokavalia is a very persuasive man. He's got a great personality, charismatic. He's going to hopefully carry the legislature into giving more money to IT and transform the state and create. Not only do you get efficiencies in you know, saving money, but you get so much more information for decision making. Our state leaders have not had the kind of information that every corporate leader demands from their information technology. They know up-to-date information. They can respond to changes immediately. Our state, you have to wait to the end of the year to find out just how many people this Department of Education actually employs. It's absurd.
The foundation helped to seed this effort in state government for the last 2 years. We've been funding it. The CIO came on board, and I will tell you, one of the most remarkable things has been how underinvested we've been in technology that have affected people greatly. I get questions a lot about how state workers are going to feel about this transformation. I don't think it's going to be a problem, and here's why. They all go home every night, have a laptop computer, an iPhone, and everything else, and they don't have any access to that technology in their workplace. They know what they're missing out on, and it's going to be, I think, really remarkable. Beyond just the efficiency issue and beyond the transparency of government issue, the other thing is The plan now, the strategic plan to transform state government, calls for $1 billion of spending over 10 years. We should really look at that in terms of what it can do for our economy in creating a different kind of economic engine in Hawaii. You know, because we need those tech jobs. We need people who are really skilled in these areas, who feel there's a future for them in the private sector or the public sector to do this kind of work.
Someone wants to know, with Senator Inouye going, won't having President Obama from Hawaii help us financially now that Inouye is gone? You're a friend of his, aren't you?
He's the of the president?
Of the president.
I've talked to him.
Oh, there you go.
The president's the president of all 50 states. He's not going to look any more kindly. Any largesse is going to be competitive among all the states, and so I wouldn't think that you can count on anything. It's survival of the fittest as far as Congress goes.
I think the person we're going to depend on is Colleen Hanabusa, and I think it would be very wise of the governor to select her. She is very capable, she's smart, she is a great negotiator. Inouye knew himself that she was the best person to take his place, and I think he was absolutely right. If she's in Washington advocating for Hawaii, it's as good as we're going to get with him gone.
But if I could be the young person devil's advocate here, I would say that you have to look at the age of both of our assuming that Colleen gets it, she is 61, 62. Same thing with Mazie Hirono. The real error here, and some might say Ed Case was preaching about this when he went and tried to run against Akaka in 2006, is that right now, both of our senators were in their 80s, and they both happened to leave at the exact same time, which was, the worst case scenario for Hawaii. There was no transition whatsoever. If you put two senators that are both the same age in there, in 20 years, are we going to be facing the same thing? Yeah, one would argue maybe you put in, this is sort of crazy, but put in a Tulsi Gabbard, put in a Brian Schatz, put in somebody who's not Generation Dan, who's not Generation Mufi, but who in fact is 20 years younger and can get those, 40 years in Congress that
60-year-olds are spring chickens in the Senate.
That's true. It could be, but it's just sort of a
I think.
Are we setting ourselves up again for the same thing?
Some people will argue and have told me that the seniority is not as important as it used to be in Congress. So it's not like when the Republicans are in charge in the Senate, they have a 6-year limit on chairmanship. So you don't have the same sort of thing where you can have a power center like Dan Inouye had been for 50 years. So that argues against it. Arguing for it, like you said, it's also really important that you be able to build and have people of different ages in the whole thing, and not have all old people in there.
Which is one reason that's so encouraging to see somebody as young as Tulsi, go. I mean, as a young person myself, to see somebody like Tulsi go and become this darling of the House of Representatives. I mean, she, Nancy Pelosi pulled her out and said, give a speech to the Democratic National Convention.
Sara, I don't trust anybody under 65. No one under 65,
So one of the things that we need to realize is that we're losing that power that was there, and whoever goes into that seat is going to take years and years to build that back up again. Yeah. And particularly because of the fiscal situation that we're facing in DC, there just simply isn't going to be as much money to go around for a long period of time. And how that plays out, how bad things get in terms of that fiscal situation, largely depends on what happens between now and, say, middle of January.
Steve, where do you see economic potential in 2013 for Hawaii? Where have you seen some business stories that are worth following that you think are really going to mean something for the state?
Well, I think there's some interesting ones. The most exciting stories are not necessarily going to drive the economy. It's the boring ones. It's construction and tourism, the ones we've known and depended on for years. but I see some great stories. Like Bill Spencer has got these offshore spheres. What do they call it? The ocean sphere. I love that idea. And he says, no, our job is not to raise fish on this. It's to sell the ocean sphere to the world. Wouldn't that be great if this innovation that he created, they took years, decade to get through all the permits and everything to succeed, where you can farm fish offshore in the ocean, and he sold it all over the world. And wouldn't that be a great advertisement for technology and innovation in Hawaii? Things like that. I was going through award nominations for the best small business person of the year. There's so many great people in this state. I had trouble, there were so many good possibilities. But it's still, if you're talking about driving the economy, it's still the old standbys. I'm sorry, it's the military, it's construction, and it's tourism.
And there's nothing big coming that you can see.
In 2013.
Right. So
Yeah.
but the big stuff is something that takes longer, right? I mean, it's something that we have to work towards. And I think we were talking about this earlier. There's a research initiative that grows the research industry in Hawaii. And this, you know,
that's the best hope for Hawaii is research and education. I think that's the best place for Hawaii to go, is to have several universities, not just the University of Hawaii, but big private or any private universities coming out here, and legitimate universities to come out here and do. No, not you. You guys are, but another one, another one.
Do you want to take one side of the chair? I'll take the other side.
UH is not only a legitimate university,
yes,
but
it's all by itself. But if we had another university system here.
I think Dobell had the vision that West Oahu would essentially become not another system, but you could imagine it that way, right? You could imagine like Hilo, West Oahu
state.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Maui College, and then you throw Manoa off on the side. But that's your flagship, where most of the research happens. But it's also happening in a big way in Hilo. We've got we've got the pharmacy school there, and obviously astronomy is spread out throughout the state. And the research initiative that the university is talking about is essentially trying to double the extramural funds that the university brings in for research. And we're at about $440 million this year. So we're talking about a goal of getting to close to $1 billion in research spending. And the other thing the university doesn't do very well right now, but needs to badly improve, is the tech transfer. Yeah. And that's part. Yeah. So I was on the president's, I don't remember what it was called, the technology committee or the innovation committee, and we worked on this for a long time. And there was a conference that was held along with the National Academies of Science, and they developed a plan, and there's going to be more and more about this in the news in coming weeks. I know you've probably heard these talks that Peter Quigley and Marcy has been giving, and that's education and research.
Yeah, and if you put HPU and BYU on steroids and push both of those so they got to be really big campuses, that would be great. That's the kind of thing. I think that's, for the United States, I think that's the undiscovered asset of America, is its education that it offers for the entire world now. And if Hawaii can get a piece of that, like with the East-West Center, and get more of that, I think that is the kind of benign growth that we could accept.
I think the thing, whatever you choose around a future economic engine for the state, it's going to be centered around this war for talent. Hawaii has got to be a place where young people, younger than 65, want to come and live and work. And if we get the right kind of talented people in here, I really feel we'll have, an engine will come in and of itself if we are an attractive place. But we have to do something about the cost of living.
Yeah.
We've got to do something around the creative economy where, the people in their 20s and 30s who will have the capability of working and living anywhere in the world got to choose us, right? And we have to have a robust arts community. It's got to be a safe place to live. My fear is, as we've watched in our lifetime, Dan, the real bifurcation of our economy and who gets it and who doesn't and really the erosion of the middle class, you know, we create this thing where we're going to lose the sense of aloha. I mean, aloha sounds trite, but I'll tell you, the people I know that are coming to live here, there are people who have moved here from Japan after the tsunami. They could go to Singapore, they could go to Seoul, they could go all over. Why do they come here? Because of this aloha. And we have to do things to keep on to this very intangible but incredibly important asset. Otherwise, we will not succeed at bringing the kind of talent we need to drive whatever people come up with in terms of this engine.
I do think that, you know, you should, one area that people don't really talk much about, but that is still growing, is this renewable energy sector. Hawaii is an incredible place to come and study anything, you know, every geothermal, wind, ocean, you know, whatever you could name. And that's one thing that seems to be funded more by federal government grants than by state government. So even as state coffers start to dry up, like with the solar tax credit fiasco that's going on right now.
Don't bring up tax credits.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Bonham
we can talk about tax
to give you
credits
one of these,
But
Sara. Watch it. He's going to give you one of these. No.
But I do think that, you
No, I
know,
agree completely.
energy is one of those sectors where Hawaii has a lot of potential, and you know, there is federal money that's being interested in being spent in this area, and you're seeing some like interesting biodiesel developments on the neighbor islands, some geothermal finally getting in the ground on the neighbor islands.
Private money also.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got investments from Japan. General Electric has been involved heavily, and you know, you talk about how much funding there's there on campus at Manoa. Hawaii Natural Energy Institute is one of the most successful institutes inside of SOEST, and their funding has
skyrocketed.
It really has. It's gone up tremendously.
And we forgot to mention, like, one of the biggest news stories of the year, Lanai being sold, right, to billionaire
right.
Larry
Good
Ellison,
point.
who,
Yep.
of all things, wants to turn Lanai into his little incubator for, you know, electric cars and everything and other. So, you know, whether he'll hold true to that promise, he's known for being quite finicky and a little bit of a bizarre person at times. But
We don't know anyone like that, do we? Do you think job opportunities will be better in 2013? UH grads are working at coffee shops because there are not enough job openings. What about the job market?
Jobs there will be more jobs, but we're also talking about systemic change. There are a lot of, you know, philosophy majors and English majors who will be working in coffee shops until they get some skills that are more marketable. That's just the nature of the world economy, not just the Hawaii economy.
Stephen Sonny says the panelists, and I think he's pointing at you, are so quick to trumpet the victories and virtues of business. They seem to forget that the biggest of big businesses, the financial sector, nearly destroyed our entire economy just a few years ago. Government cannot and should not be run like a business. The technology you want for...
So he's right about nearly destroying our economy. Not in Hawaii. It wasn't, you know, the banks in Hawaii didn't nearly destroy the U.S. economy.
In fact, we had very safe banks. We had very cautious banks, except for Central Pacific,
Yes.
which went, you know, off the rails for a while, and now is back on the rails. Our banks are a lot better than the general Wall Street banks.
This is an unfair thing to bring up. Well, what do you make? But we spent a lot of time on it in the media. What about the state of the University of Hawaii? You want to talk about, you know, we're both proud faculty members, but this was a bad year for the UH in the news, wasn't it?
Definitely in the news. And I would say my take on some of the news reporting was that there were a lot of people trying to sell newspapers. And I mean, I would say this, not to be overly sportive, there was some, you know, lack of transparency. There were a number of things that I think did go wrong at UH. But my sense, and from the people I talked to, when you talk to business people and just people on the street, my sense was that they thought that this was picked up and sort of beaten to death.
used as a straw man. That's what one
good
University
point.
of Hawaii he's a researcher, wrote us an op-ed and said, you know, just to be devil's advocate here, I really think UH is being put up as the straw man. Why are we fettering over $200,000 when, in fact, you know, we have some of the poorest education, going back to education, some of the poorest public schools in the country? I mean, the big story for Civil Beat was school bus costs and the fact that suddenly 4 years ago, school bus companies stopped competing against each other for routes, and it looked just like a done deal where suddenly prices went up. And the legislature tried to squeeze the department and said, hey, get this under control. We're going to cut your budget for for transportation. And what ended up happening, the department couldn't figure it out, and 2,400 kids now have to walk to school or hope that their parents can drive them because they had to cut more than 100 bus routes. So it was an interesting dichotomy to compare, that sort of thing.
But you can find examples like this not all across state government and all across local governments where there were bad decisions made, and I would argue you can also find it in businesses that, yeah, people make mistakes and it costs money.
I think
but when you look at this, when you look at $200,000 versus how big the university system is, it's not that surprising that
universally, people were more interested in how that happened and who was at fault and can you stop this? I think people wanted to know that information. That was a real demand.
So the lack of transparency was a huge,
Steve,
huge
you get
issue.
the last 20 seconds of the program.
Oh, I think people say it's absurd that you would try and book Stevie Wonder and you wouldn't make some basic phone calls. I mean, these people are being paid $200,000 a year to make that bad a decision. Sorry.
A lot of people are paid a lot of money making bad decisions. I wish somebody would pay me enough money so I could afford some bad decisions. Thank you all very much for being with us. I know it's the holiday season, and we appreciate very much your coming, and we want you all back again maybe a year from tonight. Join us next time on Insights for the first show of 2013 on January 3rd, when we'll examine the high cost of a college education. January begins the final stretch for high school seniors applying for college in the fall. But tuition costs are soaring and student loan debt now tops $900 billion. Sara went to Princeton. Can you imagine what her loan debt is? Is college still worth the money? And how can we make it more affordable? That's next time on Insights. We at PBS Hawaii wish each of you a joyous holiday season and a Happy New Year. I'm Dan Boylan. A hui ho.